You're 19. You're a leech. You're making my property look cheap. Arthur said it flat. Every guest on the terrace heard it. Leo didn't argue. He knelt in the mud outside his father's $30 million Malibu estate. He gathered his soaked clothes. 3 billionaire investors laughed behind him. Nobody moved to help. Not the guests, not the guard, not the young assistant clutching her clipboard by the door. Standing there in his tailored suit, Arthur believed one thing completely. He believed the house behind him was his. It never had been, not 1 square foot of it. I'm your host, and if this is your first time here, welcome to the channel where quiet people win. Stories like this one about power, family, and the moment truth finally surfaces are exactly what we do here every week. Have you ever been discarded by someone who was supposed to protect you? 3 days before that rainy eviction, a very different story was already in motion. Stay with me. By the end of this one, you'll understand exactly why Arthur should have checked the deed first.
A boy in the mud, a tycoon making a fatal misstep. Let's track the fallout.
You're 19. You're a leech. You're making my property look cheap. Arthur Whitfield said it loud enough for the terrace to hear. He did not put down his champagne glass. He did not wait for an answer. He threw the duffel bag into the mud at his son's feet. Leo Whitfield knelt down anyway. He picked his shirts out of the wet grass one at a time. 11 guests watched from the dry terrace. Maya Ortiz counted them without meaning to. Not one person moved to help. But the man in the $6,000 suit did not know something. The $30 million estate under his shoes did not belong to him. It belonged to the boy folding wet shirts in the mud. Rain fell steady over the Malibu coastline. It hit the gravel driveway in a hard, even rhythm. Somewhere behind the main house, a string quartet played for the investors inside. The smell of roses drifted from the ballroom mixed with expensive cologne and the salt off the ocean. Leo knelt in the mud in a gray hoodie soaked through to his skin. His sneakers had split at the seam months ago. He said nothing, not one word, not one plea. Arthur stood at the top of the stone steps. His suit was the color of wet charcoal tailored to the inch. A crystal glass sat in his right hand catching the porch light. He swirled it once. He did not look down at his son. 19 years old, Arthur said. Still can't pay his own tuition. Still living off a dead woman's name. He turned to the man beside him. This is what happens when you let sentiment run a household, Howard. Howard Ashby laughed into his drink. He was 51, a private equity investor with a gold watch and a laugh that came too easily. He did not look at Leo, not once, not even in passing. Maya Ortiz stood near the entrance with her clipboard pressed to her chest. She was 22, a junior assistant 3 weeks into the job, her blouse still creased from the dry cleaner's plastic. She watched Leo's hands moving through the mud. Slow, careful, not shaking. "Sir," she said quietly. "Should someone get him an umbrella?" Arthur did not answer her. He set his glass down on the stone railing. "Get off my driveway," he said, "before I have Marcus drag you off it." Leo stood up. Mud clung to his knees, his palms the frayed cuffs of his hoodie. He held the duffel bag against his chest. Water ran down his neck and under his collar. He looked at his father for exactly 3 seconds, not angry, not begging, just still. Then he turned and walked toward the gate. Maya watched him go. Her stomach turned over once hard. She had been at Whitfield Capital for 3 weeks. She had already learned not to speak twice in one evening. She stayed on the terrace. She said nothing else. Guilt settled into her chest like a stone dropped into still water. Arthur picked his glass back up. He raised it slightly toward Howard. "To simplicity," he said. Howard clinked his glass against it. Neither of them watched the gate. Leo reached the end of the driveway. The iron gate swung shut behind him with a heavy metallic groan. He stood on the wet asphalt of the public road, rain running off his hair, off his chin, off the frayed strap of his duffel bag. He did not look back at the house. He did not need to. Around his wrist, hidden under the cuff of his hoodie, sat a scratched steel watch. It had belonged to his mother. Its second hand had been frozen at 417 for 6 years since the night she died. He touched it once out of habit, the way some people touch a cross or a ring. 3 blocks down, a bus stop shelter offered the only dry ground for half a mile. Leo walked to it without hurrying. He set the duffel bag down on the bench. He opened the inside pocket, the one his father had never once checked, and pulled out a sealed blue folder. The seal was unbroken. The corners were soft from months of handling. He had read the papers inside 100 times. He did not need to read them again. A courier box stood bolted to the shelter wall, half rusted, barely used anymore in a city of overnight apps and digital signatures. Leo opened the slot. He slid the blue folder into a prepaid envelope, one he had prepared 3 weeks earlier at a copy shop 2 towns from the estate. He sealed it. He dropped it into the box. The metal door clicked shut. Rain kept falling. Leo sat down on the bench, duffel bag at his feet, water pooling around his ruined sneakers. He did not check his phone. He did not cry. He simply sat and waited and let the cold settle into his bones the way it had settled into him for 6 years. Back at the estate, the party moved indoors as the rain thickened. Arthur stood near the fireplace, glass refilled, laughing at something Howard said. He had already forgotten the boy in the driveway. He believed the way certain men always believe that a problem removed from sight, out of reach, out of mind, was a problem solved. He had no idea what he had just mailed away. He had no idea the envelope now sitting in a rusted courier box 3 blocks from his gate carried the one document capable of taking his empire, his home, and his freedom all at once. Arthur Whitfield thought he had thrown away a leech. He had activated a countdown. Night settled over the bus stop in heavy gray layers. The rain had not stopped in 6 hours. Leo Whitfield sat under the plastic shelter with his back against the cold glass. He pulled a small, water-stained handbook from the bottom of the duffel bag. Its cover read, Trust Law Fundamentals, a name scrawled inside in blue ink that was not his own. His mother had written notes in the margins, small letters cramped careful. He had read this book more times than he could count. He read it again anyway. One page had a corner folded down. Section 14. Vesting upon majority. Leo's finger traced the paragraph his mother had underlined twice. A trust vests in full to the named beneficiary on the date they turn 19 unless expressly delayed by court order. No delay had ever been filed. He knew the date by heart. 3 days from tonight. He pulled his knees up toward his chest. The bench was hard, cold, unmoving beneath him. Rain dripped through a gap in the shelter roof, landing on the concrete in a slow, steady count. He listened to it. 20 drops. 40. He did not bother counting past that. His fingers had gone numb an hour ago, stiff around the edges of the handbook's worn cover. He flexed them once, then let them still again. The cold no longer felt urgent. It felt familiar the way it had felt for 6 winters running. 12 miles away, inside a glass tower on the 40th floor, Arthur Whitfield sat at the head of a long mahogany table. 4 bankers sat across from him, folders, open pens ready. The room smelled of stale coffee and warm copper wiring. Fluorescent light buzzed faintly overhead. 50 million, Arthur said, against the Malibu estate. Clean collateral, no liens, no complications. The lead banker, a woman named Diane Foster, folded her hands. The estate is titled solely in your name, Mr. Whitfield. Solely, Arthur said, has been for 6 years. Maya Ortiz sat 2 seats down, the table notepad open pen frozen above the page. She had pulled the property file that morning. She had seen the trust clause buried on page 11, the one naming a beneficiary whose name she had not recognized until now. Her pen did not move. Her stomach did. There's a trust instrument attached to the original deed, Maya said quietly, filed by the estate of Whitfield's late wife. Arthur did not look at her. A formality, he said. Left over from probate, nothing active. Diane Foster made a note. Not a question, not a challenge, just a note. Maya wrote nothing. She stared at the folder in front of her, the one with the trust clause, and said nothing else for the rest of the meeting. Her eyes moved once toward the window, then back down to the table. Under the table, out of sight, her right hand pressed flat against her thigh to keep it from shaking. She had learned 3 names in that folder over the weekend. Only one of them mattered now. She glanced at Arthur's face, calm, untroubled, already 3 sentences past the lie he had just told, and she understood in that moment exactly how far this could go before anyone with power chose to stop it. Howard Ashby, seated near the window, leaned back in his chair. $50 million on a $30 million property, he said. Aggressive. I like it. The market supports it, Arthur said. Malibu land values are up 18% this year alone. Diane Foster slid a document across the table. We'll need your signature confirming sole and unencumbered ownership, standard language, page 6. Arthur signed without reading page 6. His pen moved fast, practice sure of itself. The signature came out clean, confident, final. He capped the pen with a small, satisfied click and set it down at a precise angle against the folder's edge. He straightened his cufflinks, one wrist and then the other. He glanced around the table the way a man checks a room for applause. Diane Foster did not applaud. She simply initialed the corner of the page and slid the folder toward her assistant. Arthur did not notice. He was already reaching for his water glass, already thinking 3 moves ahead, already certain the room belonged to him the way every room had for 20 years. Somewhere under that signature sat a lie 4 sentences long. Somewhere under that lie sat a boy at a bus stop reading a book his mother had left behind. Back at the shelter, Leo closed the handbook and pressed it flat against his chest. Rain still ran down the plastic roof in long, steady sheets. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. A text from his father's number. Apologize, and I might let you back in for the tuition transfer. Your choice. Leo read it twice. He did not reply. He turned the phone face down on the bench beside him and watched the rain instead. 3 seconds. 10 seconds. 30. He thought of his mother's handwriting in the margins of the handbook. He thought of the folded corner on page 14. He thought of nothing else. At the tower, the meeting closed with handshakes. Diane Foster gathered her folders into a leather case. We'll have preliminary approval by end of week, she said. Full disbursement pending title search, which should be a formality given your documentation. It will be, Arthur said. Howard clapped him once on the shoulder. To simplicity, he said, echoing Arthur's own words from 2 nights before. Arthur smiled. He did not think about the boy in the mud. He did not think about the trust clause on page 11. He thought about the $50 million now moving quietly through the bank's approval pipeline 4 signatures away from his account. Maya packed her bag last. She lingered by the window watching the city lights blur through the rain-streaked glass. She thought about the trust clause. She thought about the boy she had watched kneeling in the mud 2 nights ago. She said nothing to anyone. Not that night, not the next morning. The bank believed they were dealing with a king. A man of sole ownership, clean collateral, 18% appreciation, and a signature that moved fast and sure across page 6. The king did not know his castle was built on sand. By Tuesday morning, Leo Whitfield's college account showed a balance of 0. His tuition portal displayed a single red banner. Payment declined. Contact administration immediately. He read it twice on a library computer screen. Brightness low. The librarian's radio humming somewhere behind the stacks. His old debit card had stopped working 2 days earlier. $17 sat in his coat pocket, folded twice the last of what he had saved from a summer job Arthur had never known about. He counted it again anyway. $17. 3 days of food if he was careful. Across town, in a corner office on the 40th floor, Arthur Whitfield reviewed the frozen accounts on his laptop with something close to pleasure. He had called the bank himself. He had called the university registrar himself. 2 phone calls, 4 minutes total, and the boy's entire financial life had gone dark. His phone buzzed. A text sent to Leo copied to no one. Apologize publicly and I'll turn the accounts back on. Simple as that. Leo read the message standing outside a grocery store, his breath fogging in the cold air. He did not reply. He put the phone back in his pocket and walked past the entrance without going in. Maya Ortiz found the frozen account notice in the corporate ledger 3 days later, buried under a routine expense report. Her stomach dropped the second she saw the name attached to it. She sat very still at her desk, coffee going cold beside her keyboard, fluorescent light buzzing overhead in a steady grating hum. She thought about saying something. She thought about it for 11 minutes, watching the cursor blink on an unsent email. Then she closed the draft without sending it. Guilt pressed against her chest, heavy, familiar, impossible to name out loud, in a room full of people who reported to Arthur Whitfield. 3 more days passed. Leo ate almost nothing on the second. On the third, a diner 2 blocks from the bus station offered coffee for 95 cents, and he sat there for 4 hours nursing a single cup. The vinyl booth cracked and cold under his legs. The bell above the door rang each time someone came in or out. He had counted it 11 times before she walked in. Eleanor Vance was 53, an estate and trust attorney with 31 years at the same firm, her charcoal coat pressed without a single wrinkle. A silver pen sat clipped to her jacket pocket, the same pen she had carried since her first year of practice. She scanned the diner, once found the boy in the corner booth, and crossed the room without hesitation. "Leo Whitfield," she said. It was not a question. He looked up. He did not stand. "You found me." "Your mother made that easy," Eleanor said, sliding into the booth across from him. "She left instructions, very specific ones. I've been waiting 3 days for your call." "I didn't have a phone that worked," Leo said. "Accounts frozen, all of them." Eleanor's expression did not change. She set a slim leather folder on the table between them. "Then it's fortunate I don't need your phone. I need your signature." The waitress arrived. Eleanor ordered black coffee, nothing else. Leo said nothing, and the waitress moved on without pressing him. "You understand what you're inheriting," Eleanor said. It wasn't quite a question either. "The estate," Leo said. "In 3 days." "The estate," Eleanor confirmed, "and everything your father has done to it since your mother died. Every loan, every lien, every signature." She opened the folder and turned it toward him. "He's already committed himself to $50 million against a property he doesn't legally own. That happened Thursday." Leo's hand went still on the table. "He signed." "He signed," Eleanor said, "under penalty of perjury. Sole ownership, no encumbrances. Both false, both notarized, both now sitting in a bank's file." She pulled the silver pen from her pocket. She uncapped it, pressed the tip once against a blank corner of a fresh page, just enough to leave a small black mark testing the ink before it mattered. "I don't do anything without knowing my instrument works," she said. "Not once, not ever." Leo watched the small black dot bloom on the paper. He said nothing for a long moment. "What do you need from me?" he finally asked. "Authorization," Eleanor said, "to file the vesting deed the moment the clock turns. To act as executor of your mother's trust, and to make certain nothing your father signs after that date holds any legal weight." She slid a single page across the table. "Sign here, nowhere else. Not yet." Leo picked up the pen she offered. His hand was steady. He signed his name at the bottom of the page, the letters, small, careful, exactly like his mother's had been in the margins of her handbook. Eleanor took the page back and slid it into the folder without reading it again. She had already memorized every word. "Your father thinks silence means surrender," she said, standing, buttoning her coat with 2 quick motions. "It never has. Not once in the history of anyone who ever underestimated a quiet room." She left a $10 bill on the table for coffee neither of them had finished and walked out before Leo could answer. The bell rang once above the door. Leo sat alone in the booth. He lifted his own cup, the coffee gone lukewarm an hour ago, and drank it anyway. He allowed himself for the first time in 6 days something close to a smile. The trap was not just set anymore. The wolf had already locked the cage from the inside. The private dining room at the Cortland Hotel smelled of seared butter and old wine. Crystal chandeliers threw soft light across white linen. A waiter refilled glasses without being asked, moving quiet and practiced between the 4 men and 1 woman seated around the table. Arthur Whitfield sat at the head, a folder closed beneath his right hand. Diane Foster sat across from him, her own copy, open, a red pen resting on top of it. Howard Ashby leaned back with a glass of red wine already on his second. "Final title check came back this morning," Diane said. "Clean mostly, 1 footnote worth mentioning." Arthur's jaw tightened barely for less than a second. "What footnote?" "A trust interest filed 6 years ago," Diane said, scanning her copy. "Attached to the original deed. Your legal team flagged it as dormant. Standard probate residue." "It is," Arthur said. "My late wife's estate. Closed years ago." Maya Ortiz sat 2 seats down, a printed copy of the same title report in front of her. She had read the footnote 3 times the night before. She had read the underlying trust document twice more alone after everyone else had left the office. Her hands stayed flat on the table, now pressed down to keep them steady. "Sir," she said, "the trust document doesn't show a closure date. There's no dissolution filing anywhere in the county records. I checked twice." The table went quiet for a moment. Howard's wine glass paused halfway to his mouth. Arthur turned toward her, slow, deliberate, the way a man turns toward something he considers beneath serious attention. "Maya," he said, "how long have you worked for me?" "6 weeks, sir." "6 weeks," Arthur repeated. "And in 6 weeks you've decided you understand my late wife's estate better than the attorneys who closed it." "I'm not saying that," Maya said. "I'm saying the paperwork doesn't match what you're telling the bank." Howard set his glass down with a sharp click against the linen. "Arthur, ignore it. Every estate has loose threads. You clean them up after closing, not before." "Exactly," Arthur said. He did not look at Maya again. He turned his attention fully to Diane Foster. "The trust is dormant. My attorneys will provide supplemental documentation within 30 days if the bank requires it. I am not delaying $50 million over a filing clerk's oversight from 6 years ago." Diane hesitated, pen tapping once against the page. "Supplemental documentation within 30 days would satisfy our compliance department, yes." "Then we're done discussing it," Arthur said. Maya opened her mouth once more. She closed it again. She looked down at the report in front of her, the footnote circled twice in her own handwriting, and said nothing else for the rest of the lunch. Guilt sat in her chest like a stone she could not put down, heavier now than it had been 3 days ago. She stared at the circled footnote until the ink blurred slightly in her vision. She thought about standing up. She thought about walking out of the room entirely. She did neither. Her chair did not move. Her voice did not rise again. The waiter refilled her water glass without asking, and she watched the bubbles settle instead of looking at anyone across the table. The waiter cleared the appetizer plates. Diane produced the final loan documents from her briefcase, 3 copies each stamped and tabbed at the signature line. $50 million, she said, sliding the first copy across the table, secured against the Malibu property. Sole ownership representation on page 4, unencumbered title on page 6, standard perjury clause on page 9. Arthur uncapped his pen. Howard raised his glass slightly, a small private toast meant only for his friend. "Ruthless," Howard said, grinning. "I mean that as a compliment. Most men would have waited for the title search to fully clear." "Most men aren't willing to move," Arthur said. "That's why most men stay small." He signed the first copy, fast, clean, confident. He signed the second copy the same way, then the third, his signature identical, each time practiced into muscle memory over 3 decades of deals exactly like this one. Diane collected the pages initialed each signature block and slid them into her briefcase. "Disbursement will follow bank protocol," she said. 10 business days contingent on the supplemental documentation you mentioned." "It'll be there," Arthur said. He capped his pen. He set it down at a precise angle against his water glass. The same small ritual he performed after every signing, and allowed himself for the first time all lunch, something close to satisfaction. He rolled his shoulders back once. He reached for his wine. He did not glance at Maya. He did not glance at the footnote. His mind had already moved past the room, past the table, past the lunch itself, toward the $50 million now waiting on the other side of 10 business days. Under penalty of perjury, sole ownership, unencumbered title. 3 lies notarized, stamped, and now legally binding across 3 separate copies held by 3 separate parties. The felony was complete. It could not be undone by an apology, a phone call, or a change of heart. It existed now on paper, permanent, irreversible, waiting only for someone to read the trust document Maya had already read twice. Arthur lifted his wine glass toward Howard. "To simplicity," he said. Howard clinked his glass against it, laughing at nothing in particular. Maya did not raise her glass. She sat very still, watching the ink dry on the copy nearest her, and thought about the trust clause with a closure date that had never existed. The ink dried in under a minute. Arthur felt untouchable in exactly that same minute. He had no idea it would cost him everything he had. On the 5th morning, Arthur Whitfield stood on the back lawn of the Malibu estate with a landscape architect and a folded blueprint. The garden stretched behind them in tired, overgrown rows, roses his late wife had planted with her own hands 11 years earlier, now waist-high in places untended since her death. "Level it," Arthur said. "All of it. I want 4 guest houses here by spring. Ocean view units. They'll rent for $8,000 a week." The architect nodded, already sketching. "Demolition crew can start Thursday. 2 days, maybe 3, to clear the beds and the trellises." Arthur did not look back at the roses once. He walked toward the house, already thinking about square footage. 2 miles away, Leo Whitfield heard about it from a groundskeeper he had known since he was 9 years old, an old man named Sal who still answered his calls even after everything. Sal's voice shook slightly over the phone. "They're bringing bulldozers Thursday," Sal said. "Your mother's garden, Leo. He's tearing it out." Leo did not answer right away. His hand tightened around the phone until his knuckles went pale. "Thursday," he repeated. "Thursday morning, early." Leo hung up. He walked the 2 miles back to the estate on foot, through wet streets, past storefronts he no longer had money to enter, arriving at the iron gates just as a black pickup truck rolled up the driveway ahead of him. Marcus stood at the gate in a dark suit, earpiece in place, arms crossed over a chest built for exactly this kind of work. He was 38, a former Marine who had worked private security for Arthur for 4 years, and he had never once shown the boy on the other side of the gate a flicker of sympathy or malice. He simply did his job. "Can't let you in," Marcus said. "You know that." "I need to talk to him," Leo said. "Please." Marcus did not move. Mr. Whitfield gave clear instructions. Leo's voice dropped lower, quieter, something close to breaking for the first time in 6 days. "It's my mother's garden. She planted every rose in there herself. Please, Marcus, just 5 minutes." Marcus's jaw shifted almost imperceptibly. He had known Leo's mother briefly in the year before she died. He said nothing about that. He kept his arms crossed and his feet planted where they were. "I have my orders," Marcus said. "I'm sorry." Footsteps sounded on the gravel behind him. Arthur approached the gate himself, a crystal champagne glass in his right hand, already 3 sips into a bottle opened an hour earlier to celebrate the demolition permit. "Well," Arthur said, stopping a few feet from the bars, "look who's begging now." "Dad," Leo said, "don't do this. Not the garden." Arthur swirled his glass, once the ice inside clinking softly. "The garden is an eyesore. Overgrown, useless, sentimental clutter taking up prime coastal square footage." He took a slow sip. "I'm surprised you even remember it." "I remember every rose in it," Leo said. "She planted them the year I was born." "How touching." Arthur's tone stayed flat, almost bored. "Sentiment doesn't pay property taxes, Leo. Guest houses do." Leo gripped the iron bars of the gate with both hands. "You don't need the money. You have everything already." The metal felt cold under his palms, colder than the rain had been all week. He pressed his forehead briefly against the bars, just for a second, then straightened again. His $17 sat folded in his pocket untouched since Tuesday. He had not eaten that morning. He barely noticed the emptiness in his stomach anymore, the way it had become just another kind of cold to carry. "I have everything," Arthur agreed, "because I don't let sentiment slow me down. Something you've never understood." Thursday arrived gray and early. Leo stood outside the gate at 7 in the morning, watching two bulldozers rumble up the driveway and position themselves at the edge of the garden beds. Marcus stood beside him now, silent, arms still crossed, though something in his posture had shifted since Tuesday. Arthur watched from the terrace glass and hand unmoved. The first bulldozer's engine roared to life. Its blade lowered slowly toward the nearest row of roses, the ones nearest the fence, the ones Leo could see clearly even from the street. Leo did not shout. He did not climb the gate. He stood perfectly still, hands wrapped around the cold iron bars, and watched the machine inch forward one careful foot at a time. "Please," he said once more, quiet enough that only Marcus heard it. Marcus did not answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the bulldozer, on the roses, on the boy beside him, whose knuckles had gone white against the bars. He shifted his weight, once boots crunching on the wet gravel. His hand drifted toward his earpiece, then dropped again without pressing it. He had followed orders for 4 years without question. He said nothing now, but his jaw stayed tight and his eyes did not return to Arthur even once. Arthur raised his glass toward the machines, a small private toast to no one but himself. He believed he was erasing the last piece of a woman he had never truly mourned. He believed a bulldozer could finish what 6 years of silence had already started. He had no idea he was handing his own son the exact rope needed to hang him.
Nobody anticipated that play. A wealthy parent just mortgaged his son's legacy to fund a fraudulent empire. If that were me, I would have yelled the truth right there on the pavement. Imagine holding the keys to the kingdom and choosing to freeze just to build an inescapable trap. Let's keep observing.
At 6 that morning, Leo Whitfield turned 19. No one called, no one remembered, except the woman with the silver pen. She was already standing in line at the county registry office. The doors had not even opened yet. The office smelled of old paper and burnt coffee. Fluorescent tubes buzzed overhead in a long, uneven row. Eleanor stood third in line, coat buttoned folder tucked under one arm. She did not check the time. She did not need to. Eleanor Vance filed the vested deed at 8:04. Her signature came out clean across the transfer instrument. The trust document sat stapled behind it exactly as her late client had instructed 6 years earlier. The clerk behind the counter scanned the paperwork. She entered it into the system. She frowned slightly at her screen. "High-value transfer over 10 million triggers and automatic hold," the clerk said. 48 hours standard review, comes back Thursday afternoon at the earliest. "Thursday afternoon," Eleanor repeated, "is not acceptable." She did not raise her voice. She simply asked calmly for the registry supervisor. 20 minutes later, she was speaking with someone whose name carried weight in 3 counties. A favor collected from a case she had won for the county 11 years earlier. She did not ask twice. Miles away, Leo sat at the same bus stop shelter, duffel bag beside him, the handbook closed now on his lap. He had not slept. He had walked past the estate at 5 that morning. He heard the low, distant rumble of diesel engines already warming up behind the gates. His phone buzzed. Sal again. They started early. Bulldozers are lined up at the garden fence. Leo read it. He set the phone down without replying. His hands did not shake, steady, quiet, still. He sat very still. He breathed slow and even. For the first time in 6 days, he did not feel like a boy waiting for permission. He felt like someone counting down the final hours of a plan set in motion 3 weeks earlier at a copy shop 2 towns from here. "Not yet," he said quietly to no one. "Not yet." The rain had finally stopped, some time before dawn. Cold air replaced it sharp against his face. It carried the faint smell of salt from the ocean 2 blocks over. He tightened the strap of the duffel bag across his shoulder. He watched a gull circle once above the bus stop. It landed on the wet asphalt nearby, indifferent to everything happening around it. At the registry office, Eleanor stood at the counter. The supervisor reviewed the file himself. He typed for 11 minutes without speaking. Eleanor did not sit down, did not check her phone, did not shift her weight once. She stood exactly where she had stood since 8:04, spine straight, coat button chin level. She had waded through 31 years of cases that mattered more than her own comfort. This was nothing new. The hold exists to prevent fraud, the supervisor finally said, not to delay legitimate beneficiaries. I can expedite this, given the documentation. Give me 1 hour. 1 hour, Eleanor said, is generous. Thank you. She stepped outside to make a single phone call while the paperwork processed. Leo answered on the second ring. It's filed, Eleanor said. There's a hold, I'm working it. You need to hold your position. Say nothing no matter what you see happen at that house today. They're already starting on the garden, Leo said. I know, Eleanor said. It won't matter in a few hours. Roses can be replanted. A felony conviction cannot be undone. Leo closed his eyes for a moment. Okay. Leo. Her voice softened barely just once. Your mother knew this day would be hard. She built the trap anyway, 3 years before she died. She trusted you to hold still long enough for it to work. Hold still a little longer. The line went quiet. Leo opened his eyes again. He looked toward the estate 3 blocks away, close enough now to hear the bulldozers clearly. I'll hold, he said. At the registry office, the supervisor's printer clicked twice. It produced a single stamped page, recorded. Leo Whitfield, sole owner, effective immediately. 9:51 in the morning, 49 minutes after the request for expedited review had been filed. Eleanor took the page. She folded it once. She placed it inside the same slim leather folder she had carried into the diner 3 days earlier. Done, she said into the phone. Leo stood up from the bus stop bench for the first time in an hour. He shouldered his duffel bag. He picked up the handbook and slid it carefully back inside. Nothing else sat beside it now, just $17 and a photograph of his mother folded flat against the lining. He did not run toward the estate. He did not call his father. He walked slow and steady. A man walks this way when he already knows exactly how the next hour will end. Armed now with the deed to his own kingdom, the boy who had spent 6 days sleeping under a plastic roof turned toward the driveway. The same driveway where he had once knelt in the mud. This time he was not walking in to beg. He was walking in to dismantle a king. Behind him the ocean stayed gray and flat under a low sky. Ahead of him the estate gates waited exactly where he had left them 6 days ago. His footsteps fell steady on the wet pavement, 1 step, then another after that. He did not slow down, did not speed up, did not hesitate. He simply walked, calm, certain, entirely unafraid. By 9 that morning, 2 bulldozers idled at the edge of the garden, engines rattling low and steady. Diesel exhaust hung in the cold air. Arthur Whitfield stood on the terrace above it, all glass in hand. He watched the machines the way a man watches a parade thrown in his own honor. "Foreman," he called down, "why are we waiting?" The foreman looked up from his clipboard. "Just confirming the perimeter, sir. Give us 5 minutes." "You had 5 minutes an hour ago," Arthur said. "Tear it down. Now." The foreman signaled his crew. The nearest bulldozer's engine climbed in pitch. Gravel and mud churned beneath its treads as it crept toward the first row of roses. Leo stood outside the gate, exactly where he had stood the day before, hands wrapped around the cold iron bars. He had walked the last 3 blocks slowly, deliberately, arriving just as the machines began to move. He said nothing. He did not shout for anyone to stop. Maya Ortiz arrived moments later, summoned for a signature Arthur needed on an unrelated contract. She stopped halfway up the driveway. She saw the boy at the gate. She saw the bulldozers crawling toward the garden beds. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. She pressed one hand to her mouth and stayed exactly where she stood, unable to make her feet move either direction. Her clipboard slipped from her arm. It hit the gravel with a small, flat thud. She did not pick it up. She did not look away either. Her breath came shallow, quick, uneven, the same way it had the night she found the frozen account notice buried in the ledger. Marcus stood a few feet from Leo, arms crossed, jaw tight. He had not slept well. He did not say why. Arthur descended the terrace steps, unhurried, glass still in hand. He crossed the driveway toward the gate. He stopped just inside the bars, close enough that Leo could see the faint red flush of wine already in his father's cheeks.
"You came back," Arthur said.
"Predictable." Leo did not answer. His grip on the bars tightened, knuckles pale, but his face stayed still. "Open the gate," Arthur said to Marcus. "Let him watch properly, from the driveway where he can smell it." Marcus hesitated for exactly 1 second. Then he unlatched the gate. Leo stepped through without being told twice. He walked to the edge of the gravel, close enough now to see individual rose stems bending under the bulldozer's shadow. Something small and cold pressed against his wrist as he moved. His mother's watch hidden beneath his sleeve, its frozen hands still marking 4:17. He did not look down at it. He did not need to. His thumb found it anyway, pressing once against the scratched metal, a habit older than grief itself. The bulldozer's blade dropped lower. Arthur signaled toward Marcus with 2 fingers, a small casual gesture, the kind a man uses to order a second round of drinks. Marcus stepped forward. He placed one hand on Leo's shoulder, then pushed. Not hard, not cruel, just enough. Leo went down into the mud. He did not cry out. The ground came up cold and wet against his palms, his knees, the side of his face. He pushed himself upright again a second later. Mud soaked through his jeans. Gravel bit into his palm. He knelt there exactly where he had knelt 6 days earlier, exactly where this had all begun. Maya made a sound she could not stop, something between a gasp and a sob. Both hands pressed to her face now. Arthur did not look at her. He looked at his son kneeling in the dirt for a second time, and something in his expression settled into satisfaction. "Stay down," Arthur said. "It's a good look on you." The bulldozer's blade reached the first row of roses. Petals scattered under the treads, red and pink and torn, ground into the mud beside Leo's hands. For one long moment, Leo did not move at all. He thought of his mother kneeling in this same dirt 11 years ago. She had planted these same roses with her own hands, humming something he could no longer remember the words to. He thought of the handbook in his duffel bag. He thought of the deed sitting in a folder 3 miles away, the plan he had trusted for 3 weeks without any proof it would actually hold. For the first time since the rain started, he wondered if it would be enough. He knelt in the mud, watched the blade lower, and doubted, not loudly, not visibly, just once, deep and quiet, a single crack of uncertainty in 6 days of unbroken calm. Then his thumb found the watch again, 4:17, frozen, waiting the same way he was waiting for a moment that had not arrived yet. The bulldozer pushed forward another foot. More roses went under. Leo stayed on his knees in the mud, silent, motionless. His father's shadow fell long and cold across the gravel in front of him. He did not know yet how close the hour truly was, but somewhere folded inside a leather folder, the paper that would end all of this was already 3 miles from the gate and closing. The rain had not returned. The wind had picked up off the ocean cold and salted, pressing against the wet fabric of his hoodie. Somewhere behind him, Marcus shifted his weight again, boots crunching in the gravel, saying nothing. Somewhere above them, Arthur lifted his glass once more, unaware, untouched, certain the morning belonged to him entirely. It did not. Not anymore. Not for much longer. Leo knelt there and waited the way he had waited for 6 days, the way his mother had once waited for a garden to bloom. Arthur laughed once, low and short, looking down at his son kneeling in the ruined garden bed. "There," he said. "That's exactly where you belong." He lifted his glass toward the bulldozers, toward the flattened roses, toward the boy still catching his breath in the mud. He did not notice the black town car until it was already through the open gate tires, crunching hard over gravel, moving faster than any visitor's car ever moved on that driveway. Marcus stepped into its path, one hand raised. The car did not slow. It stopped only when it had to inches from him and the driver's door opened before the engine had fully cut off. Eleanor Vance stepped out first. She wore the same charcoal coat from the diner buttoned to the throat, a slim leather folder held against her side like something she had carried into battle before. "This is private property," Arthur said, setting his glass down hard on the terrace railing. "Who let her through the gate?" "No one let me through," Eleanor said. "I drove through." She walked past Marcus without acknowledging him. She crossed the driveway, stepped over a fallen rose branch, and stopped directly in front of Arthur, closer than most people dared to stand. "You need to leave," Arthur said, "immediately." "I will," Eleanor said, "once I've said what I came to say." Maya had not moved from her spot near the gate. She watched the woman in the charcoal coat the way she might watch a door finally cracking open after 6 days of believing it was sealed shut. Eleanor opened the folder. She withdrew a single stamped page and held it up not toward Arthur, but toward the foreman still standing beside his idling bulldozer. "Stop the machines," she said, "right now." The foreman looked at Arthur, uncertain. "Ignore her," Arthur said. "Keep going." "I would not do that," Eleanor said, "if you value your license." She turned the page so everyone could see it. County seal, recording stamp, a name typed clearly at the top beneath the word owner, Leo Whitfield. Arthur's laugh died somewhere in his throat. "That's absurd," he said. "I own this property." "You owned this property," Eleanor said, "until 9:51 this morning. The trust your late wife established vested fully in her son on his 19th birthday. Recorded, stamped, and legally binding as of 6 hours ago." She reached into the folder again and produced a second item, a blue sealed envelope, its seal broken now, the same envelope Leo had mailed from a rusted courier box 6 days earlier. "Your son mailed me the notarized authorization the night you threw him into the mud," Eleanor said. "I've had everything I needed since that evening. We simply waited for the date the law required." Arthur said nothing. The color drained from his face slowly the way water leaves a basin once the drain finally opens. His jaw worked once, twice, no words coming out either time. Leo stood. He rose from the mud without hurrying, brushing dirt from his knees, his palms the frayed cuffs of his hoodie. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Turn the machines off," he said to the foreman. "Now please." The foreman cut the engine without waiting for Arthur's approval. Silence dropped over the driveway, heavy, sudden, complete. "You can't," Arthur started. "This is my house. My name is on every account, every deed, every—" "Not this one," Eleanor said. "This one only ever had one name on it. It just took 19 years to arrive." Maya pressed a hand over her mouth again, this time for a different reason entirely. Tears still ran down her face, but something in her posture had straightened. Some weight lifted that she had carried since the first frozen account notice landed on her desk. Arthur looked at his son, really looked for the first time in 6 days, maybe longer. "You planned this," he said quietly. "All of it. The rain, the silence, letting me sign." "I didn't make you sign anything," Leo said. "I just didn't stop you." He thought back for one brief moment to the word his father had used in the driveway 6 days earlier. Leech. It had stayed with him through every cold night at that bus stop, a small, ugly word he had carried without letting it land. Standing here now, mud drying on his knees, he understood something his father never had. A leech takes without asking. Leo had built. He had waited. He had let the law do what it was always going to do with or without his father's permission. Arthur's hands trembled once around his empty glass. He said nothing. The wind carried the smell of crushed roses across the driveway, sweet and torn, mixing with the diesel still hanging in the cold air. Somewhere behind them, the last bulldozer engine ticked as it cooled. Arthur Whitfield stood in his own driveway, a trespasser for the first time in his life, staring at a boy he had thrown into the mud twice and somehow never managed to break. He said nothing else. He had nothing left to say. His empty glass hung loose in his hand until it slipped and shattered against the gravel, small pieces scattering near his shoes. He did not bend to pick them up. He simply stood there, silent, waiting for a next move that no longer existed. Marcus stepped back from the car. He looked at Leo, then at Arthur, then back at Leo again. He said nothing. He simply waited for instructions from whoever now held the authority to give them. Maya wiped her face with the back of one hand. She picked her clipboard up off the gravel where it had fallen earlier. She held it against her chest again the way she had that first rainy night, only this time her hands had finally stopped shaking. 2 black sedans pulled through the gate 20 minutes later, followed by a government vehicle with plain plates. 4 federal agents stepped out first. 2 bank auditors followed, carrying identical leather cases. Eleanor Vance had made one phone call from her town car while Leo dusted mud from his knees. It had taken exactly this long for the call to matter. Arthur watched them cross the driveway with the same expression he had worn since his glass shattered on the gravel. Empty, uncertain. A man who had spent 30 years controlling every room he entered. He stood now in a room he no longer owned. "Arthur Whitfield," the lead agent said, badge already out. "We have some questions about a $50 million loan secured against this property last week." "There's been a mistake," Arthur said. "My financial team handled the documentation. If there's an error, it's theirs, not mine." "You signed the documents," the agent said. 3 times, under penalty of perjury." Howard Ashby had been standing near the terrace steps since the town car arrived. He set his glass down on the railing without a word. He checked his watch. He glanced once at Arthur, then walked toward his own car without saying goodbye. 2 other investors had drifted out onto the terrace during the commotion. They followed him within the minute coats, already half-buttoned phones already out. Arthur watched them go. No one looked back. "Leo," Arthur said, turning toward his son for the first time with something that resembled desperation. "You can stop this. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them I own the property. Tell them the paperwork was old. Tell them none of this needs to go any further." Leo stood a few feet away, mud-drying, pale on his knees. Eleanor stood beside him, folder still in hand. "I'm not the one who signed a false ownership claim to a bank," Leo said. "I didn't make you do that either." "I did it for this family," Arthur said. "Everything I've built, I built for you." "You built it for yourself," Leo said, quiet, steady, no anger in his voice at all. "You froze my accounts. You blocked my tuition. You bulldozed my mother's garden while I knelt in the mud twice in 1 week. None of that was for me." Arthur had no answer for that. His mouth opened once and closed again. The lead auditor stepped forward with a clipboard of her own. "The title search confirms the property was recorded to Leo Whitfield as of 9:51 this morning. Prior to that, sole ownership representation on the loan documents was false. That makes the collateral fraudulent from the moment of signing." "Federal bank fraud," the agent added. "We'll need you to come with us." Marcus stepped forward at Leo's small nod. He took Arthur's arm. Not roughly, but firmly, the same grip Arthur had once instructed him to use on a boy in the rain. "Get off my driveway," Leo said quietly, echoing words spoken to him 6 days earlier from this exact spot. He did not raise his voice to say it. Arthur's face went the color of old concrete. He did not resist. Marcus walked him toward the waiting car, past the flattened roses, past the idle bulldozers, past the terrace where a party had once laughed at a boy kneeling in the mud. Maya watched from the gate clipboard, finally still against her chest. One of the agents paused beside her on his way out. "You flagged the trust discrepancy in the corporate ledger," he said. "Twice, according to the internal records. That's on file." "I should have said more," Maya said. "You said enough," the agent said, and moved on. She let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 6 days. She looked down at her clipboard. Empty pages, now no more figures to hide, no more numbers. She had to pretend not to understand. She set it down on the hood of a parked car and left it there. She did not pick it back up. Eleanor turned to Leo once the cars had cleared the gate. "The estate is fully yours. Clean title, no liens, no claims left standing. Your mother's trust did exactly what she built it to do. Leo nodded. He looked toward the garden, the flattened rose, the torn petals scattered through the mud. Some of the roses near the back fence had survived untouched out of the bulldozer's reach. "We'll replant," he said, "all of it exactly the way she had it." He reached up out of habit and touched the watch at his wrist. The second hand still sat frozen at 4:17, the same as it had for 6 years. He did not need it to move anymore. It had already done its job the way his mother had always meant it to. He held his wrist there a moment longer. He did not check the time on his phone instead. He simply stood watch against skin and let the stillness of it feel like something earned rather than something broken. Rain had not returned all morning. The sky over the coastline had cleared to a pale-washed blue by early afternoon. Leo stood in the driveway where he had once knelt in the mud. He watched the last black sedan disappear through the gate his father would never walk back through as its owner. The boy the world had once called a leech now held the only name that mattered on every deed to the estate. Arthur Whitfield left his own driveway that afternoon exactly the way he had once ordered his son to leave it, alone, on foot, into the open street.
Can documents really strike back? This tale is fiction, but the arrogance of unchecked financial abuse is terribly real. My patience would have shattered on the very first night in the rain. Have you ever been discarded by someone who was supposed to protect you, only to realize you held all the leverage? Tell me your experience in the comments, and subscribe for more stories where the quiet ones finally win.